5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then I'll go. Hello, everybody. Now, I'm here with Will Senyo, and he's in Accra, Ghana. And wonderfully, we're in Africa, and there's a funeral going on the outside, and there's noise, ambient noise, and that is real life. So, Will, look.
It is.
Just great to see you. And Will is the founder of Hub Africa, and you're now creating a startup campus across 20 buildings, and currently there are already 230 members involved in the first 5 spaces. So before we get into that, but just so our listeners know there's something big going on, let me ask you a couple of questions. You started your career with that well-known hunger project and then somehow slipped into sales management with MTN, the biggest telecom provider in Africa. And then you probably thought, I think you thought, this doesn't quite align with my bigger aims in life. And what you then did is you connected with the Ghanaian diaspora, largely in America and so on, and wanted to do more than just them sending back remittances. Can you tell us all about that? That sounds really interesting.
Yes, you quite correctly put it when you said at some point working in MTN was not necessarily what I thought my life goals should be, and wasn't aligned with the vision for myself. So primarily at that point, I had an experience in non-profit, as you rightly put it, and wasn't really sure whether all the elements there were also right, and the incentive structures within the non-profit sector in Africa was feeling a bit off. Then in corporate Ghana, I was also too much hierarchy and a kind of just told a line thinking that also didn't just quite align. So I needed to find a middle ground. And that middle ground was me going full crazy experimentation and trying a few ideas. One of the big ideas at the time was trying to get Ghanaians in the diaspora to invest directly in small businesses, starting here in Ghana. And the goal was to make sure that they have long-term commitment, but the checks they were cutting was very minimal, to the point that it was not impacting their cash flow, essentially. So it's low enough not to be felt by someone making 6 figures in the US, but high enough for a startup here to feel the impact on the business, on their business growth. And that was the balance we were trying to reach. And so it primarily involved having like coffee one-on-one sessions with Africans who we know had money, living in DC, New York, San Francisco, Atlanta, places like that, and then convincing them that there was a way to contribute to the economic growth back home, directly beyond just sending money to friends and family for food and housing and healthcare. And we managed to get quite a substantial group of Ghanaians to start the process with us. And then we raised money from the Rockefeller Foundation to build a company to do the trainings for these people so they can understand what the opportunity was back home. So it was a thrilling part of my entrepreneurial journey when I was just around maybe 24, 25, and just set me on this journey of exploration.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. But then, and now we're coming a bit to sort of bureaucracies or something, you suddenly bumped into sort of regulatory problems that, there you were, all you were trying to do is get people to give back, and they didn't seem able to do that in a simple way. What was that? Explain that, please.
Yes. So you can chalk this up to youthful exuberance and not doing the research well ahead of time to realize what this bureaucracy red tape was going to bring my way, but eventually it did come my way. And it was fairly straightforward, which was that the Ghanaian government, in trying to protect certain small industries from foreign direct investment that could take away livelihoods, decided that the minimum benchmark threshold for foreign investors to invest in key industries here was going to be $200,000. Now that means that if you are investing anything less than $200,000, you can't hold equity in some of these companies. So it may have to be turned into a loan of some sort. But direct equity investments or joint ventures had to have a minimum $200,000 check investment. Now, that means that our strategy of getting Ghanaians to invest, Ghanaian diaspora to invest $5,000 and $15,000 in small companies, had one big major issue. These guys were Ghanaians by birth and descent, but most were now European or American citizens. So they had a direct interest in growth in their home country, but officially they are not Ghanaian citizens, which means that rule applied to them. And so it opened a whole set of problems that we had not envisioned when we started this. And so we had to rebuild the strategy to see how they can still engage, but not hold equity in these companies. And it just fell, from there, it just fell apart in a way that we couldn't get a handle on.
Yeah, no, what's interesting about that is because essentially what you were saying, the government response was not nuanced enough, that there was obviously so much good there, and there was presumably no discretion for people to say, well, what is this Will trying to achieve? He's trying to achieve something that's good for us. And I mean, perhaps that's one of the problems. Is that still a big problem in Ghana as a whole?
Yes, and that is the question of policy balance and private sector growth that, for good reason, is still an evolving conversation on the African continent, right? Because governments act most of the time in good faith, not to question that, to protect citizens or do things that they think is in the best interest of citizens. But if the consultation is not broad enough, or the process to reaching these decisions doesn't go deep and wide enough, then policy tends to be fixing problems and reactionary instead of trying to see ahead of the curve and try to plug all the potential holes that there might be. So there is a lot of such situations that we've experienced, even as we try to build a company here, where policy is well-intentioned, but doesn't have enough depth to be able to foresee all the potential problems it creates in trying to fix one problem.
But what's interesting about what you said depth, it doesn't go in depth, but you also said in width meaning also connecting and seeing things through the eyes of the civic world, the business world, and so on, which is essentially about a joint conversation, a 360 perspective conversation. Is that roughly what you're saying?
Exactly that.
Yeah. Well, look, let's now slowly, because that was called Slice Biz and that was a great idea and so on. But then you really seem to get ambitious. I love the ambition you've got. And you had a really big vision. And that vision is with your Hub Africa, it could be Africa actually, Hub Accra, um, to create this massive campus, which you, in a sense, convinced the mayor to see as a controlled experiment, a real-life experiment that dealt with things like affordability, helping startups, creatives, tech-savvy people, social entrepreneurs, and so on. Basically, you said to me, de-risk things. But, and here we come again, I'm sorry that I'm always coming back to a problem, but you're solving it. The real estate market was completely dysfunctional and didn't really allow you to do what you wanted. So you had to sort of try and do something different. Is that correct?
Exactly that. So what the lesson of building slice based and the eventual failings of it taught me was that you can't out innovate. Sometimes you can't out innovate government policy. So you have to find a way to work with them so they can also get the learnings that you hope can inform policy. Because sometimes strong experimentation and facts and data is what you need to convince them that the expansive nature of the view they need to have of the policy is not covered. So if you can prove to them with some data, then it's helpful. So we thought that on this second iteration of our vision, which was to find a way to still help that core community of tech entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, and creatives who have become the highlight of what it means to be Ghanaian these days, Ghanaian and young, I should say, we need to find a way to create a bubble to essentially protect them from the shocks of living in an inefficient city, and at the same time, let their work be a source for referencing so that the city and the country can act better based off of the data that comes from their work. So we kind of kill two birds with one stone. We help that community we are very excited about, and at the same time help policy people make better informed decisions. Now, how do we do that in our case? The goal became to cluster up to 20 buildings in one neighborhood. So if that neighborhood is about half a square kilometer, and so it's about 6 streets, about 5 to 10 minutes from the party district, and then 15 minutes from the central business district. So quite central, and then again 15 minutes to the airport and close to the beach. So truly central, but at the same time fairly removed from everything. That allows us a controlled environment. Now, what do? We build living, working, hangout spaces, all tied to these 3 core communities of creative tech entrepreneurs and social entrepreneurs, and trying to create nexus points for them to collaborate, invest directly in their companies, and improve productivity and efficiency because of the working parts that we put together in close proximity. So they have more time to work without commuting for hours and sitting in traffic and all of these things. But at the same time, also crack a major problem here, which is that the real estate market is broken, and it's even worse for young people who don't have enough cash up front to pay for advance and all of these things. Out here in Accra, you have to pay sometimes 24 months of rent in advance, which if you're an individual, it's mad, and if you're a company, it's even crazier because your cash flow cannot match these things. So for us, it became this idea of a test case that if it were to go right, it would have enough data points for the city of Accra to see how they can take lessons from here to fix some of these major issues in the wider city.
Now, what's interesting there, though, is also that who owns the buildings? Who owns these buildings at this moment?
Exactly. So what we did was to partner landowners in this neighborhood and then build leases that have a very long view to what we are trying to build. So landowners agree to be in the land trust and give leases at below the market rate but also commit to a longer lease, and then give us the option towards buying the land as we raise more capital and we invest in that community. So it's a shared vision in that sense. We expect landowners to buy into the vision by taking some of the upfront losses so we can collectively create more value in the neighborhood.
Because what you're saying here sounds, unbelievable, because we know that getting that grouping to have a joint vision, to have all these negotiations, to do things at below maximum profit, this must have taken you more than 5 minutes to sort of get those groupings together. And how many landowners were there? Just approximately.
So currently we are dealing with 4 different landowners, but we had something going for us that is a unique part of why this works. We happen to coincidentally have chosen a neighborhood that was originally inhabited by one of the founding fathers of our country. So he was the first settler in that neighborhood, and the whole neighborhood is named after him. So it's Akwaje, who is one of the youngest of the founding fathers of Ghana, post-independence. And so his family became our key ally, which meant that everyone in the neighborhood almost had to follow suit because
that's beautiful.
You get it. So it was a unique situation that became kind of the secret sauce to making all of this happen. You have the respect of a very respectable family in the backing, and then you use that leverage to get everyone on board.
Yeah, you're very clever.
If you are good enough for these guys, then you must be good enough for me.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that, Will. I mean, one of the things you said to me is you encountered sort of a lot of old economy thinking seeping into a world that is new economy driven. I thought that was very well expressed by you. Can you just say a couple of words about that?
Yes, in the key rhetoric right now to be young and in Africa right now is that, you can do anything because the power of the internet, right? And so that rhetoric assumes that we are playing on a level playing field, that someone building something in Accra is as good as someone building in Berlin, provided they have the skill sets and all of that. But in reality, it's not so. There's a lot of old economy problems that still persist in parts of our world that would make it nearly impossible for us to compete fairly on the global stage. So how do we take out some of those inefficiencies so that we can truly compete? And that's part of what I'm talking about. The old economy thinking here is that people have to pay things in advance, but it doesn't work. It doesn't align well with the digital culture that we are trying to build here. So how do you match these things? And it's a big problem because most of it is also macro in the sense, and it's not to the point that you can always engineer it on the micro level. And it then means that things like the experiments we are building become more important to shield from the macro issues that that are not easily fixed by one person or the other. And that collective coming together to do it for themselves is the only way to hack some of these old economy problems.
Well, I mean, the point about the real estate is really emblematic because obviously from your travels, that there are so many settings where it's very much in and out. You can be there for 3 months, you try, you can fail, and all of that, which gives people energy to say, I can try it, rather than saying, I've got to have this massive business plan to first of all get the investment to pay the rent in advance, and I don't even know if I'm starting the business.
And then it doesn't make you as agile in how you execute because you are tied to things that are long-term and not allow you flexibility. And so people are stuck in things for so long when they should be in and out and just moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I want to pick up on that word about agility because you have really thought in a sophisticated way about partnering and partnerships and the need to balance autonomy in the partnership, but I suppose you could say autonomy control because sometimes, it's a public sector institution. Just tell us a tiny bit about that.
Yeah, in building this, we quickly realized that you cannot, and I've said this, you cannot sidestep some key partners. Government is one key partner. International development agencies with an interest in youth outcomes have become a key partner. Investors, private capital are key partners. And when you realize that bringing all of these together can affect your vision and also take away some autonomy, because for each partner, their agenda might be different. So how do you consolidate multiple partners and get them on a singular agenda that is also in your interest and also gives you the autonomy you need? It's a fine balance. And so for us in government, we quickly realized that mid-level government, city-level government was the best to engage instead of central government that tends to have big ideas without the willingness to back it all the way. And then when it comes to private sector capital, we realized that family offices were better partners than your typical lenders. So family offices with impact orientation are better investors. And when it comes to international development partners, you want people that are in it for the long term, not some quick outputs they can trumpet. So you learn a few things on what the levers are for what kind of key partners and how to mix it up to gain autonomy, build relationships for long term, and at the same time manage and reach the vision that you want. It's still a work in progress, I'll say, in terms of knowing how to balance it. But so far, I think we've done a terrific job of it.
Yeah, what I think also is quite interesting, when you said to some extent the city level is a good level for you to be working at. And then within the city level, you've got obviously the mayor who loves your project. And then you've got obviously level 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now, which of those levels is difficult for you? Typically, it's 3, 4 in many countries because people don't feel they've got enough control or decision-making power. Is that the same in Ghana?
So it's broadly the same in Ghana, but then again, in this specific situation, every level has been a place of comfort for us to play. So in Ghana, it starts from the mayor to assemblymen, unit committee members, and local representatives, and we have a relationship all the way. So there are things that we would rather not bother the mayor with. We'll go to assemblyman representative and have it fixed. So it's a road in front of one of our new buildings that has a crack in it and it's causing flooding in front of the buildings. You don't want to burden the mayor with that. You go to your local representative and say, this is something for the neighborhood to fix, but we have the resources and we are willing to do it. What do you require from us to make sure that it's done with city code in mind? So for things like that, you deal with your local representative and it's taken care of rapidly because your local representative understands the value you're bringing, takes charge of talking on your behalf at the city level, expediting the process so that it can come to a conclusion really rapidly. And things like that we've done fairly well again, I believe.
I mean, there are two things that you said there. One, that you said you'd fix it yourself, which I think is fantastic because so often it's just a demand.
We do that all the time.
You know, you're fixing, which is a different approach to running things. But I suppose always people know as well that the mayor is positive about your project, so that obviously can't do any harm. But you know something, it really strikes me because I've seen you as a sort of social entrepreneur, and when we look at, you know, a person who has that sort of image and reality, of course, you know, we don't think of all these subtleties that you've just described, which I think are really, you know, the texture, the nervous system of actually getting things done. And it requires, which I'm seeing in our conversation, a set of skills which, you know, you can't just learn in business school at university. It's sort of something completely different.
Agree.
It's emotional intelligence, it's diplomatic skills and things like that. I mean, do you agree with that?
I completely do. And I think my evolution as a person from when I started my career in nonprofit through to this point has definitely proven that bits and pieces learned on the journey have been truly valuable to shaping me to someone that can code switch and engage people on the level that they need to be able to be supportive of my work. So the state of mind and the presentation I have to deal with my local representative is different from what I need to be able to deal with an international investor based in Chicago. Those are two fairly different human beings inhabiting the same person. And it's a fairly interesting code switching mechanism that can mess with your head sometimes. But it's also part of the fun and why you do it.
I love that phrase you're using, the code switching mechanism. It's very interesting because it's slightly techie as well as a way of expressing it. Just as we finish off, I mean, just where now with Hub Accra and the campus? I mean, basically you're moving along and it's step by step, is that right?
Exactly. If there's anything we learned here is that waiting for all your ducks in a row to do anything will never happen here. So you build as you go and you use the leverage of the execution of the past things to show what's possible in the future. It's the only way my people sometimes understand vision. Not what you have on paper, it's what you've managed to have done so far. And so for us, having managed to get to 5 buildings on a journey to 20 has improved the credibility by 100-fold already. And people can see it in real time and its impact. So it kind of self-reinforcing that way and gets, for every new one you build, it increases credibility 10-fold that you can then use to get exponential growth from there. So the way we see this is that in its final form, it's a bubbling, energetic community that is showing what intentional execution can look like in the city of Accra. Also expands the view that young people taking action on their own can be one of the most powerful drivers of systemic change and cause broad seismic shifts in culture here. And then finally, that there can be an example. Think of it as a shining, I'll say that shiny thing on the hill that we can point to show what's possible if we can all come together and do such, execute with such intentionality. And in the end, I believe that it's almost just making a point for us that there's an alternative way of achieving things that is outside of government and central planning. That also gets us where we want to as fast as possible, and that we can collaborate to make some of these things happen in a faster way than we have seen for our country.
You know, that's great. I like your phrase about don't necessarily wait for the ducks in the row to all be there, because then it'll never happen. And look, thanks, Will. That was really great. And I really admire and respect what you're doing and all your friends are doing in Accra. And so it's wonderful to speak to you. And I hope we see each other all in person somewhere. And I think we need to send a delegation over to Hub Accra and your campus. So anyways.
Long overdue.
So see you soon. Thanks a lot. Bye.
See you, Charles. Great help. Bye.
Bye.